Hello, I'm Dr. John McLean, and you can reach me at drjohnmclean@gmail.com. If you'd like to help me learn about these subjects and interact with me, Dr. John McLean at gmail.com. But what I'd like to do right now is to continue this series on tough questions, short answers to tough questions. And the one for today is why do you allow children to suffer? Matthew 18, 1-6. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And he called a child to himself and set him before them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like a child or like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever then humbles himself as this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." To interfere with children coming to the gospel, to interfere with children who are part of the gospel and are Christian, is against the very fabric of God's being and God's love. And he puts forth the idea, the image of a heavy millstone being tied around a person's neck and then just dropped to the depths of the ocean in a horrific death for doing that. You remember other examples where they prevented the children from coming up to Jesus, and Jesus rebuked them for that. So the first thing I want to emphasize is God's love for children, and that children can come to the kingdom. And in fact, up until recent statistics, it still shows that 85% of Christians will reflect back and they will say that they became Christians before the age of 20. Now, I also want to go back to the early story of Abraham and Isaac in the book of Genesis. And if you're familiar with this, God commands Abraham to build an altar, to arrange the wood, and to offer Isaac on the altar. This is after Abraham wrestled with God about, "Oh Lord, let Ishmael be the son of my inheritance." And that was around his 13th birthday. Today we would call that in the Jewish culture the bar mitzvah, or when he was becoming a man. And that was Abraham's only child, his only son. And Abraham begs for God to allow Ishmael to be the son. And God says, no, it's going to be Abraham. It's going to be Sarah. It's going to be the son of the promise. It's not going to be Ishmael. And so we see Isaac is born, and Isaac now becomes the special object of Abram's love. And Abraham begs for and watches over him. But when God says to Abraham, sacrifice your son, it's normal for you to say, that is crazy. That is ungodly. That is blasphemous. But remember this, in the culture of that day, and in every culture that I've ever studied, child sacrifice was seen as a normative, willing thing, obligatory thing to do in order to appease the gods and have their favor upon you. And so what appears to be a blasphemous story to us here is actually the opposite. This is God screaming out to Abraham and to the entire culture, and screaming out and saying, stop, stop, stop this horrific, blasphemous, evil practice of you. I will provide the lamb. I will provide the propitiation. I will provide the appeasement, ultimately through my son, Jesus Christ. Stop this evil practice. And if you read the book of Acts tells us that throughout the wildering wanderings of Israel, when they had rejected to go into the promised land, that they continued to sacrifice their children to Moloch and other gods. So, understanding this historical context, we see that it says Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. There the Lord provided an acceptable lamb. This is, remember, before the law, before all of the sacrificial system was established to correct this evil. And as to this day, in the mount of the Lord, it will be provided. And so we see here in Genesis that there is the emphasis that children are not to be used to appease God. Now, why do you, God, allow children to suffer? And the bigger question is, why do you allow anyone else to suffer? And the answer is, it is the consequence of death that came in the garden. Eve was deceived, but Adam willfully sinned, willfully then tried to blame it on God, willfully tried to blame it on Eve, and the judgment fell. And unfortunately, it falls on all of humanity. But remember this, God sent his child, his unique and special son, to suffer the eternal penalty of sin in a compressed amount of time as an eternal being, to provide salvation for all. Isaiah 53, I don't understand this. I can't comprehend it. But it said it pleased God to crush his son, that he might bring many to righteousness. So it grieves me when I see children suffering. I have done funeral services for babies who were miscarried. I've been at funerals for babies that died of SIDS. I've been with families who have lost little ones. And I have no compassionate answers at that time, but to ultimately be able to focus back on what God did with his son to set us free from sin and to be in his presence in heaven.